Welcome back to Purrfect Takes. I'm your host, Stephen Patton, joined as always by my co-host and dear friend, Jacob LaQuire. And in typical North Carolina fashion, around this time of year, it's starting to heat up outside. I've had a couple days already above 80 degrees, and you can feel the humidity just setting in. And something that always kind of cool you down this time of year. You'll start hearing the songs of the ice cream trucks going around the neighborhood, and you start kind of thinking of the different varieties of flavors that might come, or the assortment of options. And I think with this draft class in particular, the edge position offers a lot of different varieties and flavors, and I'm really excited to talk about kind of the different avenues teams can take to address the edge position.
Well, to start, what was your go-to from the ice cream truck as a kid? I always got the SpongeBob popsicle, and it never looked like him. Like the eyes were always missing or something.
So I was the oldest of several kids growing up. So we typically just get the simple, like the nut covered, like chocolate cone, something simple like
The
that, where it's just
drumsticks, yeah.
exactly. And the drumsticks you can't go wrong with. We buy them in bulk from the grocery store, but like typically something of that assortment. I did like the kind of like some of the fudge bars that they would have. Fudge, that can never go wrong when you get a good, nice chocolate fudge bar.
Right. And to bring that into Panthers talk and the NFL talk, teams are, I guess, the GMs and scouting staff are asking the coaches what kind of flavors they want for their edge rushers, right? A couple years ago, I think the last time the Panthers added an edge rusher in the draft, it was the flavor of we want a guy who can set the run first, right, before he rushes the passer. You even saw it on like the Panthers blueprint where they showed the behind the scenes thing. When we traded up to draft DJ Johnson, you see Coach Evero, the defensive coordinator, on the phone. He's like, hey, we're going to set the edge first before we rush the passer, right? And you can hear Johnson saying, yes, coach, I'm excited. Hasn't amounted to a ton since then, but I think we know the flavor for Carolina. They want like the big prototypical body there that can kick inside or is nimble enough to drop into coverage. That's their flavor. Some teams like pure outside linebackers. Some teams like the traditional thing. Some teams like, if they still run even fronts in the year of 2025, like somebody that can do a little bit of everything. So I think it's important to try to figure out what flavors the Panthers like. And if you look at the 30 visits, we have 23 different visits announced so far. And the biggest position group that's represented in those visits is the edge rusher group. 7 edge rushers so far that the Panthers have hosted in their building with 30 visits. Obviously, Jalen Walker was a local visit as well, if we want to talk about him as an edge rusher. But with those guys in the building, a lot of different body types. Shamar Stewart, the 10.0 Roz guy, the monster freak athlete. Donovan Ezaraku, the beast just came out, so I learned how to pronounce his name. From Boston College, smaller but really bendy, explosive around the edge. And then some day 2 and day 3 guys to sprinkle throughout. So pretty clear to see that the team wants to address edge rusher at least early and then maybe again later in the draft.
Absolutely. They're building a bunch of contingency plans. I would assume if certain guys aren't at certain picks, or if they aren't able to move up and grab a certain prospect that has caught their eye. And it's interesting because they're doing their due diligence at a position that needs to be filled. And like you said, what is the Carolina Panthers flavor or variety of ice cream that they're looking for? And based on what Dan Morgan has done over the past 2, I would say, off seasons, you look at Jadeveon Clowney, DJ Wanham, obviously DJ Johnson, and with Dan Morgan in the building when DJ Johnson was drafted and Evero still being in the building, you see that he's looking for a guy that's 6'4", 6'5", north of really 260 pounds. And I think we also got that with Patrick Jones this offseason, where it's just they want bigger defensive ends. And that's really to just kind of suffocate the run game, keep everything inside. And with a lot of the fortification on the interior, which we'll get to on Tuesday, that's something where that's, I think, the direction they're heading. So we'll talk about the prospects that probably best align with that mold and what makes sense for the Panthers at 8, or like you said, maybe later on in the draft in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round. But for now, I want to talk about Abdul Carter. And this guy, as much as what we alluded to, I think, on Tuesday about Jalen Walker being this Micah Parsons comped player,
Hmm.
Abdul Carter is that guy. And it's not just because he went to Penn State. They both wore the number 11. These are physical freaks that both kind of check out around the same size and weight, fly around the field causing havoc. And when you look at some of the pressure rate numbers that he generated this year, it's just absolutely absurd. And it's not gimmicky stuff. I mean, he is winning in multitude of different ways and not just speed. He can win from the inside, the outside. And I'm really expecting a coach to unleash him at the next level. And really, I would love Jim Schwartz with the Cleveland Browns to be able to unlock this guy next to Myles Garrett, because you could line either of those two guys across the defensive line to really wreak havoc. And I know I'm jumping ahead of myself, but like this is, I would say, the clear edge number one in this class. And I don't really think there's an argument.
For sure. This is like a clear top 5 graded guy year to year. Easily number 1. The Micah Parsons comp is dead on, not just because of the Penn State stuff, but also Carter played middle linebacker, inside linebacker his first 2 years at Penn State, then moved to the edge, similarly to how Parsons did once he made it to the league. Incredibly explosive. And I think he's only scratching the surface because of the limited snaps across his career at edge rusher. And to your point where it's not gimmicky and he's able to do this consistently, he's doing it against the best teams, right? Played against Ohio State, fried their offensive line. And granted, Josh Simmons had gotten hurt, I think, the week before or 2 weeks before. So the left guard did kick to left tackle, and that was a rough trial by fire for the left guard. I think Donovan Jackson is his name. Carter was doing this against Oregon, who won the Big Ten. He was doing this against, I think they started with SMU in the playoff. It was either SMU or Boise State. I can't remember who they started with, but Carter was going crazy against all levels of competition, especially against the good teams. And that's definitely the stuff you want to see out of somebody that you can consider a first overall pick and even a top 5 pick. I think his floor really is that 4th pick with the Patriots, because we know who's going 1. It's going to be Cam Ward. But then after that, there's uncertainty. Is it going to be a QB? Is it going to be Travis Hunter? Who's it going to be? I think Carter fits in with the Browns, like you're talking about, with the New York Giants, who had the 3rd pick, and with the New England Patriots, who, despite spending a lot of money this offseason on defense, still really need their marquee edge rusher.
Absolutely. And that's exactly what Abdul Carter is. He is a marquee pass rusher. There were only 3 guys in this draft class that had a higher pressure rate on true pass sets. And a couple of these guys we'll talk about today: Josiah Stewart, Braden Swinson, Colin Oliver. Those are the only guys that are higher than Abdul Carter. I mean, this is a guy that truly wrecked games, phenomenal against the pass with his speed and versatility as a pass rusher. The biggest knock is going to be that this guy is under 260 pounds, can be a little underwhelming when it comes to his play strength, and can kind of get bullied in the run game. And I think some of the best example was against Bowling Green. A guy in Harold Fannin, who's not really known for his blocking, was able to kind of tee off on Abdul Carter on a double team. And you just wonder if that is going to limit him in the next level against the run. Well, similarly to what we've seen with Micah Parsons. And that's really, I think, the only aspect of his game where you start to be concerned with, because everything else is really great.
Yeah, and I think that the struggles against the run come with his lack of experience playing the edge full time. I think he possesses all the physical tools, and I think he's disciplined enough in the run game. It's just an experienced tackle is going to be able to snatch his arms, right? Or like Harold Fannin, who has played at a high level for years now at Bowling Green, knows how to perfectly chip before he goes out and runs his route where he has bricks taped to his feet. The people with the experience are going to always be able to exploit the younger players, unless they're just true freaks like Jeremiah Smith at Ohio State. But even the people like Carter, I think when you go up against a high level experienced player, might struggle a bit. So the learning curve might be a little bit rougher for him coming into the league, but his athletic tools should give him such a head start in becoming a bona fide NFL star edge rusher. I think if there were anybody in this class that you could hang your hat on and say, this is a guy that could contend for Defensive Player of the Year, be like a double-digit sack guy multiple years in his career, it would be Abdul Carter. And then like the places we talked about, like if he goes to the Browns, he doesn't have to go against the number one tackle, right? That's Myles Garrett. That would just help both Carter and Garrett out immensely. So I really don't think you can go wrong anywhere early in the draft for Carter. And nothing's a home run when it comes to draft picks, but I think for the edge class, he's probably the closest thing to a home run that isn't one of the like high floor guys like the Shamar Stewart and Micah Williams who have the NFL size. There's no concerns about their size because Carter's a little bit smaller. I think for the guys that aren't the full 265, 6'6" edge rushers that are usually taken at the top of the draft, he's the closest thing to a home run that we've seen in quite some time.
Again, this is a prospect. When you look at just the production and his size, he's better than the guys he's getting comped to with Micah Parsons and Nick Bonito. Obviously, Micah Parsons played inside linebacker the final year at Penn State, so we don't know what he would have looked like coming off the edge. He probably would have been just as diabolical and been able to wreak havoc from that position a lot more. And so it's just when you see it work at the NFL, you see him check off a lot of these boxes and take a step and improve as a player. I feel very confident about him being the first edge off the board and probably gone within the first 3 picks. And there's a lot of teams that could use his skill set in their lineup. But after him, what flavor are we getting into? Because we could go a direction where we're talking about more speed rushers, guys that really affect the quarterback and their ability to get around the edge quickly. We could talk about prospects that you alluded to and Micah Williams and Shamar Stewart, which have the NFL size at that position that a lot of coaches look for, or at least traditionally looked for. And then I think you have these guys from, I wouldn't say necessarily both are smaller schools, but smaller players, lesser competition, those kind of prospects. What direction, what angle do you want to head after Abdul Carter?
Well, let's start with the last group you talked about there, just because if you're looking on YouTube at this wonderful graphic you have here, displaying havoc rate, which is like sacks, pressures, just stuff that disrupts the game, like fumbles, turnovers. If you look at the far right, even past Abdul Carter, past some of the guys that are very notable in this class, you'll see 2 people right beside each other. Mike Green from Marshall and Donovan Ezeraku from Boston College. Both aren't like premier talent destinations, right? Marshall has produced Randy Moss, very famously good receiver, right? But you couldn't really name me 5 guys after that. Boston College, Luke Kuechly, former Panther great, Matt Ryan. But then after that, you can't name me 5 or 10 super, super good NFL prospects. But both of these guys in their own right are incredible players. We can start with Mike Green, just because on my board, I just want to check and make sure. On my board, I have him outside linebacker 3 or an edge rusher 3, and he's above Donovan from Boston College. Mike Green might have the best bag of pass rush moves in the class. He's a phenomenal athlete, still a little bit undersized, but is able to get after the quarterback in all sorts of ways. He can chop, spin, do the speed to power, speed rush, like any. If you lined him up and asked him to do drills to show off different types of rushes, he would be the perfect guy to do that, right? Good bend, like so, good natural athleticism and getting around the tackle. Good at stacking and shedding, which what I mean by that is when you engage and strike the offensive lineman. This is particularly important in the run game. When you engage them, knowing when to go, all right, here, we're done, and then go to your gap, go after the running back, or even in the pass game, if you're like kind of looking at a QB that can move around and escape, that's a good thing to do as well if you're rushing on the weak side there. High production on the ball. I think he led FBS in sacks this year. And it's funny, Ezeraku was second, or he was tied for second with Antoine Powell-Ryland from Virginia Tech. But both these guys incredibly productive. My thing with Mike Green, there's the obvious off-field stuff, which I don't want to get into on this podcast, but I think he also needs to improve in the run game as well. I know he had a high run game grade from PFF, but at least in the games that I watched, and those were Louisiana, Ohio State, and Virginia Tech, I thought he didn't set the edge firmly. Like he was like super concerned on getting after the quarterback. A lot of times in college, you'll hear coaches say, stop the run on the way to the quarterback. And that's kind of what you got for him, right? Like he wasn't, the first thing in his mind on the rep wasn't, all right, let me set the edge. And then if it's not a run, go for it. It was, I'm always going for that QB and nothing's going to stop me. And nothing did stop him. But I think in the run game, we're going to see in the NFL, if he doesn't fix this, something I like to call the Aaron Donald rule. Aaron Donald was such a disruptive rusher in his career with the Rams, right? That a lot of times teams could just run away from him, let him come into the backfield, but it's kind of like a trap play because they've already designed to run away from him, takes him out of the play. Mike Green can get caught in a lot of plays like that. So overall improvement in the run game, I think, is paramount for him transitioning to the league. But he's just a menace of a pass rusher. And if you can convince yourself that he can fit the culture and all the off-field stuff checks out, he's going to be one of the best pass rushers day one from this draft class.
I couldn't agree more with a lot of what you've said about Mike Green as a pass rusher. This guy is twitched up to the point that all the moves in his bag just become so deadly when he decides to use them. And I think it's not only that he has a variety of options, it's how he sequences and stages these moves in a game. And I think it becomes a chess match with that tackle that he's up against or is lined up across. And that, I think, becomes an intriguing point because, again, he's not so much worried about the run game coming at him, which I think it's not only using that against him in terms of how fast he's getting upfield. He's a smaller guy to where when you get a tight end or a guard combo on him blocking, he can get nullified because he is a little bit on the smaller side. So again, what we talked about with Abdul Carter just a second ago applies to Mike Green, and I think a little bit more so. I think where you brought up PFF's run grade, I think when you saw different read option looks, he was really good at crashing down at the line of scrimmage. This guy has a relentless motor and does pursue ball carriers, even if they're running away from him. And you got to love that. This guy racked up a lot of tackles, was where the ball was a lot throughout the last season. And I think that's going to transition to the next level. Like you said, it just depends on how teams evaluate the off-field concerns and where he lands. This guy feels like a perfect landing spot for like a team like the Pittsburgh Steelers, where they get these talented guys and they're able to smooth out these character issues because that's Mike Tomlin's calling card. And I think a prospect, even though I think early on in this process, I thought of a guy like Khalil Mack, he came out a little bit heavier. He could stop the run and fit the run a little bit better than Mike Green. I think he's very much like an Alex Highsmith, shout out Charlotte alum, in terms of just having the ability to get after the quarterback in a variety of different ways and having that more slender frame to you. And I think in the right situation, he can hide his flaws and work on those while being able to exemplify and showcase what he does so well.
Yeah, I think you put it really well. Just all around excellent pass rusher. And you really can't talk about his pass rush ability to a high enough level. I think a team like the Atlanta Falcons is a good landing spot for him. They really need pass rusher juice. They need D-line juice in general. And the Falcons just, for whatever reason, don't like taking Georgia Bulldogs. So if for whatever chance they pass on Michael Williams or Jalen Walker, I think that would be a good choice there with them, with Mike Green. The other guy in this group, Donovan Ezeraku, he similar concerns for kind of the weaknesses, right? Can get washed out in the run game. He played in an even front, which 4-3, 2 defensive tackles, 2 edge rushers. And for a small guy that's more fit to be an outside linebacker, that really hindered him in the run game. But even despite that, in the pass game, he put up like tremendous stats. Really good elite bend. If you want to look at somebody for bend when you're looking at edge rushers, like being able to get underneath an offensive lineman's strike while maintaining your balance and still staying on that path to the QB, Ezeraku is the guy to watch. Like elite high level bend there. I think he's also
and that's
good
not
at,
even, I think, his best move, which we'll get to in a second. But like he's
yeah,
got a couple of moves that are like, wow, like that is impressive, and it's just violent. And like you said, he's able to push the pocket in towards the quarterback, which his bull rush isn't like phenomenal. But again, it's that ability to just constantly put the tackle towards the quarterback rather than like being passive and just there in your stance kind of against the run.
Yeah, I think the bull rush is phenomenal for what they were asking him to do based on his size. Like being in an even front, you don't really get a lot of help if you're an edge rusher. It's like a one-on-one thing. Odd fronts are like 3-4 defenses, right? You have 3 down linemen, and then if both of your outside linebackers are rushing, you're either getting a one-on-one or you might have to go against a running back or something. Ezraku didn't have that luxury a ton this past year at Boston College. Boston College underwent transition, right? Because their head coach went to go be the Packers defensive coordinator, so they had to redo their whole scheme this past season. But I think he's been his best attribute, but it's not really a move. I think you can apply all of his moves with bend to help get around the QB. Able to drop and spy pretty well as well. Like he can move in space well. I think he's somebody that you're going to be able to deploy in like short area coverage. Like if you have like a safety blitzer or something and need to drop your linebacker into coverage, I think he's good at that. Gets the QB on the ground. Like some of the people we're going to talk about have problems finishing plays, right? Ezraku doesn't have this problem. If he gets in the backfield, it's a pressure, it's a hit, or it's a sack. Like no issue there. And his contact balance, not something you really talk about with edge rushers. That's more of like a ball carrier or a receiver kind of thing. But even if he gets bumped, he does a really good job of staying upright, keeping his his lower body perpendicular to the ground so he can keep going. And if you combine that with his bend, he's just really, really hard to stop. I think the Florida State game was like the perfect example of who he can be at the next level. And granted, Florida State was not very good this year, but he put on a show against the Seminoles in that game.
And the move that I want to highlight that was really his calling card is the cross chop. I mean, his ability to work inside with that, it's violent. The swipe to just come down and he's inside all of a sudden, got this beautiful angle to the quarterback. And he had several plays in that FSU game in particular where it was just he had a sack, he forced a quick incompletion, and it was special watching just his impact on the game. And I think compared to a guy like Mike Green, why their production is similar, I don't think he necessarily has all the skills that Mike Green has when it comes to rushing the passer. And you would see it when he would attempt like a spin move or various other kind of complex pass rush moves. And it was almost very, very slow and methodical to where the tackle could kind of just it's not pathologically see it, but like
he had to think about it before the move a little
exactly. But it's the tackles was able to kind of catch you in that. So I want to see him grow, and I think he has the ability to, but until those are like second nature to him, I don't think it's going to be nearly as impressive, like I said, as a cross chop, as his ability to bend and get around the offensive tackle. Just some of these skills that we already see excellently. I think he's got to work in other departments to improve there. And then again, like we talked about with Mike Green, again, a little bit undersized. I think what impacts, because I said earlier, his bull rush isn't great. His first step isn't super, super explosive for a guy his size. So you'd expect a little bit more oomph. And I think that's what impacts kind of that bull rush and pushing the tackle back into the quarterback's lap. But again, he has so many other moves and ways to get to the quarterback and finish that he's a guy I want on my roster. And I believe the Panthers have a 30-day visit, team private visit with him. Yes. And this is a special guy that if, again, Panthers get an offer at 8 and they move back to the teens, this is a guy that I would send the card in. He doesn't have the off-field concerns that Mike Green does, and he's still a very, very productive pass rusher. I think he's very similar in terms of build and not necessarily being the strongest edge rusher to a guy like Dante Fowler. And if for some reason this is a guy that starts falling through the first round, the team that just lost Dante Fowler and does have a need at edge at the end of the first are the Washington Commanders. And we saw what Dan Quinn and that defense was able to do with a guy like him. So I would be excited if I were the Commanders that if this guy starts falling to either move up in the draft or just take him when he falls there. Again, I don't know if he gets there just because of how talented a prospect he is coming out of Boston College.
Well, you brought up Alex Highsmith for Mike Green. I think another Pittsburgh Steeler could be applied to Ezraku there. Nick Herbig, somebody they drafted recently. A little bit smaller, but very good bend. He's not going to go through tackles, right? But what he excels at is going around them and still getting production in the backfield. That's Ezraku to a T there. You mentioned that the Panthers do have a 30 visit with him. I think the other first round profile edge rusher guy that they have a 30 visit with, and we can kind of transition to a new flavor of ice cream here, is Shamar Stewart. And the flavor we're going to
We aren't
get,
going to Mikel Williams. Okay.
well, they don't have
Okay.
it's the
Oh,
30 visit with Stewart.
it was
Right.
the pro visit. You're right. Yep. I
Right.
apologize.
And this group here is this is the Jadeveon Clowney sized guy, right? This is the Myles Garrett sized guy, the Trayvon Walker. I think even now Shamar Stewart has surpassed Trayvon Walker's relative athletic score. I think Shamar Stewart is now the lone 10.0 at the edge rusher position. So most athletic edge rusher prospect in combine history in Shamar Stewart this year. So a lot to like from his size, speed, strength, trait standpoint. The thing with Shamar Stewart is his production. 4.5 sacks across 3 seasons is not something you ever want to see. And if you just take numbers at face value, that's going to scare you a lot. Similar guys like Trayvon Walker, he had production, and he was a low production guy in college. He went first overall. He had better numbers. Micah Williams, who's also in this group, had 5 sacks alone this year, playing on a sprained ankle the entire season, right? So when you look at this and say, oh my goodness, 4.5 sacks, I think 1.5 sacks in his last season, that is not something I want on my team. And normally I would say people are right about that. It is a concern. Like, I don't think he can finish plays at a high level right now. He can get into the backfield. He led Texas A&M in pressures this year, but he didn't get the QB on the ground. I think shedding blocks is an issue for him as well. And I think the angles he takes on his rushes need to improve as well. But what I will say is defenses, Texas A&M, and they have a lot of defensive line prospects this year. Nick Scorton is another edge rusher that's going to go in the top 50. They used everybody in a very, very poor way. This season, Shamar Stewart played at over 290 pounds, which is insane for an edge rusher. At the combine, I think he weighed in at 267, more his natural weight. So I think if he plays in a more natural position, that's going to lend him to getting into the backfield faster, getting the quarterback on the ground faster, because he's not carrying 30 extra pounds. But what he does do well, we talked about his athleticism and his strength. I think he's able to go through tackles if he squares up and gets his rush right. He has good dip and bend for his size. It's not Ezeraku level, but for a guy that's 260, close to 270, I think he has pretty good dip there. Lineup versatile, right? You want to talk about a NASCAR package or a bear package. If you want to move him as your 3-tech outside on third downs, he's good there. Good at diagnosing runs, I think, is an underrated thing for him. Like, he can tell if it's a counter or a trap or something like that, and always puts himself in the right spot. I think he has a good long arm move. And overall, I think if he can land with a team that knows how to prioritize and use edge rushers or linebackers, because I think he'll profile more as an outside linebacker, I think the sky is the limit for him, because his floor is NFL body, NFL size, strength, and ability to play the run at a decent level. I know the production isn't going to back it up, but when you look at how he plays it, I think he's just a step late. Like, he recognizes what's there. That's his floor. And if you can turn that floor into a 50th percentile outcome, or maybe even 65, 70%, you can get a guy like Trayvon Walker out of him. But it's going to take some time with him. And I think that's what people don't really take into account when they look at Shamar Stewart. It's like, oh my God, his production's so bad. How is he a first rounder? It's the traits part that I think a lot of teams and a lot of fans are honing in on. And as we know, as Panthers fans, teams love traits. And if a team convinces themselves that these traits are 1 in a million or once in a lifetime, which they are for him because he's the most athletic edge rusher ever, then for his weight, then I think a team's going to take a chance on him in the first round. And for what it's worth, it was reported that he is accepted a green room invite. I'll have to try and find who said that. I think it was Jordan Schultz with Fox Sports. And they're only inviting 8 to 10 people in the green room this year for the draft. So if you get that invite, you're pretty much a guaranteed first rounder. So you shouldn't be shocked to see this guy go within the I don't think he'll go top 10, but from San Francisco on at 11, anywhere else, I think it's fair game.
What's interesting about Shamar Stewart, he played at, like you said, around 290 pounds. And there's a guy that I want to talk about that was a little bit heavier coming out that I think he actually comps to better than a guy like Trayvon Walker. And this is where I want to segue into the relative athletic score. When we saw, which I think at the time was a 10.0, it is now a 9.99 in the system. But Trayvon Walker actually did some of the 3-cone drills that we never saw from Shamar Stewart.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody wants to talk about, okay, where's the lack of production? He played 4-eye, this, that, the third. I'm trying to remember if it was him or Micah Williams, but I was hearing something along the lines that they still played enough like reps on the outside to where this production should not have been this porous. Like we're talking about a guy who got 1.5 sacks, and you're projecting him to be potentially a top 10 pick at the next level, which to me, that's where it starts getting a little absurd, because I think the reason why he can't finish is because he doesn't have that I want to say almost like short burst, the ability to get around the edge and really finish a play. And to me, that is a big concern. And so when we look at a comparison, as much as, yes, Trayvon Walker wasn't super productive at Georgia, a lot of that was the system. And I think Trayvon Walker, if you compare some of the other testing, if we got agility scores, Shamar Stewart is probably closer to a guy like Darius Robinson that came out and got drafted by the Arizona Cardinals. And this was a guy who played interior defensive line until his final year in college. And then when he got on the outside, absolutely wreaked havoc. But I mean, we're talking tackles for losses, sacks, this, that, the third. And then even before that, I think when he was playing inside for Mizzou, he had 3.5 sacks. So again, I have a lot of issues with the lack of production. I think that has a lot to do with his ability to be more agile. And if he's not as stiff, he loosens up a little bit, which I think we've seen plays where the bend is there. He can put it together. This could be a very special player, but you are doing a lot of projecting. And to me, that's scary to do when we're talking about a top 10, top 15 pick. He's definitely a first rounder, but that's kind of my hesitation when we talk about him in that era.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you there. It's the projection part for me is difficult, especially when we can move to Micah Williams now. Similar boat, like lower production than you would want. But number one, Micah Williams played on a sprained ankle again the entire season. Number two, he actually got 5 sacks just this year. That's more than Shamar Stewart has in his college career. And number three, while he wasn't, I don't think, beefed up to the incorrect weight that he should be playing at, you can really take a look at Georgia's defense this year and how players were used versus every other year in the Kirby Smart era. And you'll be like drawing question marks like, why is this happening? Why is Micah Williams being played as a 4-eye? Same thing that happened with Will McDonald and Will Anderson Jr. in their final years of college. They were doing to Micah Williams. And I guess because they didn't feel secure in Warren Brinson or Nazir Stackhouse or Tyrion. It's not Tyrion Davis-Price. That was the LSU running back. But there were interior guys at Georgia that maybe they didn't feel did a good enough job, so they had to kick Micah Williams inside and run him as a down lineman on odd fronts, which shouldn't be what he is. He's an outside linebacker, true and true. And when you compare that to Shamar Stewart and say, oh, this guy has decent production, oh, you can legitimately explain away a lot of it, then you're left wondering, you're right, why is Shamar Stewart being talked about as a top 10 or 15 pick when Micah Williams really, to me, is the guy that if you want to project the high-end athletic player, you want to explain away he was in a wrong system, he played injured, this is a guy worth a top 10 pick. To me, that's Micah Williams because I know he can get the quarterback on the ground. I know that he has good reps against NFL talent like Kelvin Banks with Texas or Will Campbell at LSU. Like he was eating those games despite being injured. I know that this guy can take his team to a college football playoff berth. And I know that Texas A&M doesn't have the same amount of talent as Georgia did this year, but they had pretty close to it. You got to remember 2 years ago, they had the highest recruiting class ever. It was like 7 5-stars along the defensive line. And they went in the portal and got Nick Scorton from Purdue, who the year before had 12 or 13 sacks, if I'm not mistaken. So they aren't hurting for talent at Texas A&M. But still, I think Micah Williams did everything better. He's just not going to be a 10.0 on the RAS sheet. I don't think he did all the stuff to qualify for a RAS score because he was still working off the injury at his pro day. But if I had to guess, he would be in the 9.9s. And the gap between 10.0 and 9.9 isn't significant enough for me to dismiss that he's a much more productive player. He has actual moves to get around tackles instead of like just throwing his athletic body at him. And I think he can like truly command a defense in the run game as well. I think he's a very disciplined run defender. To me, Micah Williams is far and away the better, if you want the prototypical athletic NFL size guy, like let's say this is like the vanilla flavor of ice cream or something. This is like the pure vanilla bean, perfect vanilla flavor. And Shamar Stewart's might be like imitation vanilla that you pick up at the supermarket instead of getting it at an actual ice cream store.
I agree. Mikael Williams is special in his own right. I think he's cut from a similar cloth like Trayvon Walker, a little bit different. But like you said, just in a Georgia system where he's asked to do something that is going to impact pass rushing numbers. Obviously, I don't think his pass rush numbers were just like off the charts when he was in true pass sets. Again, towards the bottom of the league at 13.6%. Shamar Stewart was a little bit higher in terms of a pressure rate on true pass sets at 16 or 15.6%. So when you're looking at just kind of production, these two both struggle generating kind of pressure from the pass rush standpoint, but both are really good shooting the gaps, stopping the run. And I think what like Mikael Williams' calling card is because he was asked to play more inside as a down lineman to stop the run. This is a guy that's a strong anchor with textbook hand usage against the run. And I think you want that from a Georgia defender coming out, especially if you're the team that allowed the most rushing yards in the league last year. So this is something where, like from the Carolina Panthers, I don't think it's sexy, but I think it's a lot safer than Jalen Walker at 8. And it makes a lot of sense. Also, given the prototype, this is a guy that is 6'5", 267 pounds. What did we talk about during the Panther segment at the top of this of kind of the guys that they're looking for? They're looking for guys over 6'4" and over 260 pounds. Like, you check both of those boxes, and why, yes, the pass rushing production isn't there. If he can stop the run and Evero can design a couple blitzes and you have some of these other veteran defensive linemen generating those pressures, it makes a lot of sense to bring Mikael Williams on from that standpoint, because he can get a lot of reps on early downs on first and second down, and then he can kind of get sprinkled in on third downs, and while you're keeping your veterans fresh. So I think there's a lot to like with Mikael Williams as a prospect at 8. I do think he has a higher ceiling, in my opinion, than a Shamar Stewart, just because when you turn on the tape, I see a lot more aggressiveness towards like when you're finishing and getting after the quarterback than I do from Shamar. And to me, I don't think that's an element of Shamar Stewart's game that he's just going to magically fix overnight. I think you really can see it with Mikael Williams at the next level.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And I guess the final point I'll make on Stewart versus Williams is, if you, and I hate to be like just watch the film guy or watch the tape guy, but throughout Williams' career, he started as a true freshman, just like Malachi Starks did, like we talked about. Jalen Walker also played as a true freshman, but Micah Williams' freshman season, college football playoff, he's destroying Paris Johnson Jr. and getting to CJ Stroud. That was CJ Stroud's like coming out game that made him worth the second.
And Mikael Williams was chasing him down. Yeah. Like
so when you see that from his true freshman season all throughout his sophomore year, even in the Clemson game when he before he hurt his ankle, he was tearing it up. And then ankle hurt, you see the explosion take a step back. But the stuff you're talking about, like his hand usage, I wrote excellent hand usage, no wasted movement in the run game. So he, as soon as he latches on,
he just doesn't have any of
there's no flash, right? He's going bang, bang, coming after you.
Oh, 1,000%. What I'm saying is that hand usage in the run game, he just hasn't developed that in the pass rushing element because, again, that wasn't Georgia. So I think he can learn that because we've seen him learn it from a run standpoint. So, again, no wasted movements. I think he can learn different elements like what we talk about, like what Mike Green or Donovan Ezeraku, those two prospects kind of bring to the table as pass rushers. I think he can develop into that just because we have seen him refine a really good skill set with his hands in the run game.
For sure. And I think that if I didn't mention it, he's number 14 on my board. So I don't have much of an issue taking him at 8 overall if he's there, because that's still in the same kind of tier for me. And I think we've covered that flavor. So if we've talked about whatever Abdul Carter is, Neapolitan, like the cream of the crop there. We talked about maybe chocolate with the smaller guys, vanilla here. I guess we can get into strawberry, which some of the speed rushers of smaller guys. And I think you have to headline that with James Pierce Jr. out of Tennessee. Coming into the season, he was the number 1 pick or like the consensus number one guy, because he had a very, very good season the year before.
Wasn't he
with
like the
Tennessee.
consensus around like February 1st? I'm not saying he was the top guy, but like, wasn't he up around like Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter, like towards the end of the college season this year? It wasn't just like
Yeah.
before last year?
I think his slide has been in the offseason, and that's when there's when a lot of information comes to light, right? If there's talks about him having off-field stuff or being lazy in practice or whatever it is, that's going to drive him down the consensus, or like down media and team boards. But in consensus, he's still strong. For me, he was number 7 on my board, the second overall edge rusher. Really like his package of edge rushing moves. 99th percentile bend is what I wrote for him. So just like Ezra Raku can get up and underneath the offensive lineman. If you watch Nick Bosa on some of his reps, he like is almost laying down on the ground, and like he looks like maybe like a lion or something getting ready to pounce the way he lines up. James Pierce does that quite a bit too, and it serves him well with his speed to get up and underneath the lineman. To get into the backfield early in the play. It's actually one of the negatives I wrote for him, is that he jumps too early sometimes, kind of like Von Miller. You know, he would time it and sometimes miss, sometimes he'd be too early. You're going to get a little bit of that with James Pierce, but I think his length, like his arm length, is really good. Very good at, again, getting up and underneath O-lineman. Even if he doesn't jump early, I still think he has the good first step and burst and speed off the line to still catch linemen off guard. I think he's a disciplined run defender. He can improve, but I think he can set a solid edge. He has the strength and the length to do so. And he's a willing run fitter as well, which is something you don't see a ton from a lot of people. Like Mike Green, don't think he was a willing run fitter, because he was like, all right, I'm going after the QB. If there's a running back there, I guess he'll be on the way there. But I think you can mold Pierce into an effective run defender at the next level. It's the low snap count is a concern, and I think that's kind of the off-field stuff. Like, is he coachable or whatever the buzzword is for him? We get this kind of stuff every year, but sometimes you do see players end up falling because, like Adonai Mitchell last year, the receiver from Texas. I want to say he was in my top 20 or something, and those kind of rumors or remarks came out, and he ends up falling to like 45 or wherever he was taken. So sometimes there is fire to the smoke, and if that turns teams off, I think there's a good reason, or a good chance that he will fall. But I think in terms of an on-field player and all the stuff you want out of him, like size, speed, production, I think all that's there with James Pierce.
It's kind of like the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. It's the player you want on the field, but not the person you want off the field. And I think what's great about James Pierce is he's out of all the other guys that we've talked about some freaks, and a guy like Shamar Stewart and even Mikael Williams when he's healthy. James Pierce is the only other guy outside of Abdul Carter that we've spoken about that's on Feldman's freak list, which is a freak list done by The Athletic. And he truly is a special player. It's like he's got springs in his legs when he's coming off, similar, like you said, with Nick Bosa, just his ability to get after the quarterback. Some of the knocks, and I don't think it's as much of a knock. I think it is truly a skill set for a player to recognize kind of snap counts. I understand it's not necessarily as nuanced at the college level, but that was really an edge that he had playing the edge position, was his ability to kind of time the snap and really kind of get after the quarterback from a timing and speed element. And speed is the name of the game. And that is really kind of, I think, what he brings to the position. A lot of the issues he had prior to this season, it seemed like he improved or worked upon in his game, which goes against the uncoachable remark. But then again, going to his snap count and then looking at the graph on YouTube here, his havocs per game on an aggregate standpoint aren't that impressive. It's more when he's had limited reps and he's fresh off the bench, he's ripping off some insane pressure rate numbers. And I mean, they are pretty ridiculous. He is up there again with guys like Mike Green and Abdul Carter coming in at around 27.2% pressure rate on true pass sets, which is good. I mean, that is a really impressive number, but you wonder, okay, is this due to him not being on the field as much and just being a fresh athlete now coming off the bench? Is this, he does have this talent, he just needs to be in the right coaching environment. And so I think if teams are doing their due diligence, and 30 visits for the most part, unless you're the Carolina Panthers, you're kind of going over these red flags, seeing kind of who these prospects really are, and seeing if kind of the media narrative is true or not. And it's exactly like you saying, is there fire to the smoke that we're seeing? And we're going to see that on draft night. I very much could see him falling to the second round simply because of off-field concerns. And again, teams are more concerned about sometimes what's going on Monday through Saturday than they are just about what's going on Sunday. And that's why you see some of these talented guys fall on draft day.
If I had to put a bet on it, I still think he's going to go on day one. I think it's going to be really hard for a team like the Packers to pass on him, or a team like the Eagles. I think the Eagles are just going to take whoever that best edge rusher left is and just be happy with it. The rich are going to get richer there, but I really like his fit with the Packers. They take kind of toolsy guys that might need just a little bit of refinement, and the Lucas Van Ness pick so far hasn't paid dividends. And I think a lot of the production they got from Rashawn Gary has regressed this past season. So I think edge rusher is one to watch for them. I'm looking at his just raw production numbers here, and coming into the year, it's easy to see why he was number one. He had 15 tackles for loss last year and 10 sacks. This year, 13 tackles for loss and 7.5 sacks, so a step down. But if you want to attribute that to a low snap count, I think if you looked at the havoc per game here and stretched it to like havoc per snap or a per snap basis, you would see James Pierce be easily the number one guy on the right there. But alas, he had a low snap count for a reason.
Here's what I'm going to bring up about him. And I think this is a good thing to talk about as Panthers fans is Brian Burns. I think comps very similar to a player like this, where you have a lot of speed. There's a lot to like about a prospect or a player like this, but you can become a liability in the run game. And I know you said on the run snaps that you saw, he seemed adequate, disciplined in his gap. If that becomes a concern at the next level, that's where it's like, okay, can you be on the field for as long as we need you to? And I'm not saying it's a Jordan Davis situation with Philadelphia where it's like, are you really getting the snaps and most bang for your buck from a first round pick? And that would be my concern with James Pierce is if you can't keep him out for close to 3 downs, then like, what are we doing? Like, I feel comfortable, even though I'm not super happy about the ceiling of a Shamar Stewart or Micah Williams. I know I can have them out on 3 plays or kind of like your first through third down and not feel like they're a liability. They may not necessarily get the pressure I want, but I don't feel like they're costing me anything based on them being on the field.
For sure, yeah, and I think the Burns point is good because they would play Burns on all 3 downs, but on some of the rundowns, they turn him in, they put him in a spin cycle, to put it lightly. And if that is a concern for Pierce, then you have to wonder, is that worth the 8th overall pick? And I think to your point, probably not. If he can't give you, let's say, 10 plus sacks his rookie year, that's probably not worth playing 40% of your snaps, right? Especially for a younger player. And I think that's one of the main concerns for Pierce to headline this group. Talent-wise, I think I'd still take him at 8, but if the stuff about him not being playable for as many snaps as you want is true, then I just don't think we can't afford that luxury at pick 8. The Eagles can because they don't need him to be edge rusher 1. They have Nolan Smith, who's taken a big step this past year and who's already a good run defender. They signed Bryce Huff last year, so they probably want to play him a little bit. Jalix Hunt had a really good playoff run, so they have the guys there. They have the luxury of that. Not sure that we do. And getting to that point, I think the next person in this group we can talk about, Princely Umanmielen from Ole Miss, another maybe luxury pick because you want to talk about somebody who's a vicious pass rusher like Mike Green, that's Princely. But if you want to talk about somebody who's probably an even worse run defender than Mike Green, that's also Princely. Like, this guy could be a violent designated pass rusher from day one. He has the size you're looking for. I think he's going to come in around 6'4", 260. So NFL weight, that's probably 265 after an offseason training program. Just really violent rusher, good speed, variety of different moves he can use, good bend for his size. But when it's a rundown, it looks like he's taking a break. Like, he's, instead of setting the edge, he's just kind of stand there to like muddy up space. He's not actively pushing against the O lineman. And then when he does go for the running back, I think he overcommits his gap and shoots too far in, allowing running backs, especially good one cutbacks, to take the cut, get behind him, and cut upfield.
Princely is, I would say he's a poor man's James Pierce in this class. In terms of, he's a worse run defender. He's a little bit smaller. I don't think he's necessarily as fast, but like you said, violent pass rusher. This is a guy that is going to add that boost. Again, when you talk about a luxury pick towards the end of the first round, we talk about the Eagles potentially getting James Pierce. I think Princely Umanmielen is on their board, is kind of in their sights, because again, if you can develop something like that and stick them out on the field on third downs and keep guys fresh on a rotation, he adds a little bit of burst. That there is something there to work and be molded. But again, I think that's where the questions start to begin. Is he worth a first round pick? He's probably more of a day 2 guy, because again, there is a little bit of a developmental curve, especially when it comes to the run game and him being a viable option for more than just third downs.
Yeah, I like that you brought up the Eagles pick. In my first mock draft with 2-point conversion, that's who I gave him, was Princely Umanmielen. And exactly your point, he can be just a designated pass rusher early while he continues to develop. He's been in college for 5 years, so it's not like this is a super young, super raw guy. But every year he was in college, he improved his production. It started at Florida, it was like 1 sack, then it went to 4, 5, 7, and then eventually this year at Ole Miss, 10.5 sacks, more tackles for loss. So he's definitely improved throughout his time. So it shows that if you're going to have a level of projection, you can kind of fit the projection actually working with him, because he has improved throughout his time. But again, I think this is a guy like you're talking about, who with the Eagles, for instance, they could run Nolan Smith and Jalix Hunt on their first couple of downs in the run game. And then if they want to bring in a NASCAR package, have Princely come in and play on the outside and be an effective pass rusher in year 1. And like when we're talking about
similar
luxury
to,
picks,
I would say, like Josh Sweat, who they lost in free agency. So you want to
yeah,
talk about like
similar body size, yeah.
Exactly. And so it's like, I could definitely see that pairing working, because like you said, you don't have to necessarily have him out there, but you still get that kind of Josh Sweat like production from the pass rush standpoint.
And even as a prospect, Josh Sweat was in the same vein, maybe late first, early second, but he had a lot of injury concerns at Florida State, so he fell. And then the Eagles were able to make the most out of that. If similar, not injury concerns, but concerns in the run game don't hinder the Eagles' projection of him or how they have him on their board, that could be a really good pick for the Eagles as well. I think the final player in this kind of group we want to talk about, I don't remember what flavor we call it, is like raspberry
strawberry,
or something.
I think
Strawberry.
Yeah.
Oh, because I did Neapolitan for Abdul Carter. Yeah. Josiah Stewart is we want to talk about Jalen Walker being a small edge rusher and projecting him. I think the true
he's still bigger than Jalen Walker.
A couple pounds. Yeah, I think Walker has longer arms though. But the true small edge rusher projection guy to me is Josiah Stewart from Michigan in this class. Started at Coastal Carolina, I think, before transferring to Michigan the past couple years. And we talk about Abdul Carter, Mason Graham, and Kenneth Grant, the 2 interior guys that really muddy up the waters for Michigan's opponents. Josiah Stewart is just is like a mighty mouse. Like, he's creating havoc in his own right. Despite his small size, really disciplined run defender. I think he maintains gaps well for his size. Excellent motor. If we want to look at anybody, like how I talked about Ezuraku as the prototype for Ben in this class, motor is going to be Josiah Stewart. He never quits on the play. Excellent vision, I think, which is important. Being someone who's shorter, a lot of D linemen are taught to have one eye outside the helmet. So when they're blocking the guy, they want to have kind of like the helmet of their opponent in the middle here so they can see the quarterback still. I think Stewart's really good at that despite being shorter at 6'1". I think he has good burst and dip for his size. Really violent hands, which is why I said like the Mighty Mouse kind of guy for him. Just all around really good player. It's just that he's not NFL sized. And I know that for other positions that might be less of a concern. But at edge rusher, your job is to contend with 340-pound tackles, right? It's your job's to get the strong lineman on the ground. And I think his size is going to hamper him being a higher draft pick. But man, his skill set and production and motor, I think he's going to be a good culture guy as well. If the Panthers are dead set on building the culture, I don't want Jalen Walker at 8 as the small guy. I would much rather have Josiah Stewart at 57 as a productive edge rusher that can come in on some downs and be the relentless player that he is.
So we talked about Princely, who does have kind of the bigger frame where you'd expect him to be able to fit the run a little bit better. Obviously, Josiah Stewart little bit smaller frame, can get it pushed around in the run game. Both of them are creating about the same amount of havoc per game. So I think when you can get that kind of production, he may be there a little bit later compared to a guy like Princely Uman-Milan. I think that's a excellent pick at 57. My only concern is you did have Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant in the middle, so you have a lot of one-on-one opportunities. But when you're seeing true pass rush sets and him getting after the quarterback, he led the league out of all these college prospects in pressure rate. I mean, this guy had a pressure rate of almost 39%. Like we're going almost on a 40% pressure rate that you're able to kind of generate, whether it be a hit, hurry, sack on the quarterback on a given play. Like that is impressive. And so I think that
this
relentless motor.
This is against Ohio State. This is against Penn State, the best schools in the country this past season. It's not like I don't want to like discredit Mike Green and Ezuraku, but Mike Green played Ohio State, right? But that was his big game. Then he was playing like Tulane and the other player or the other teams in his conference. They might have played Charlotte this year.
Yeah.
But Josiah Stewart's playing Ohio State, Penn State, Indiana when they were still undefeated. Like he's playing against real NFL talent and still holding his own on these one-on-ones against O-linemen that are going to be drafted.
Absolutely. And from a weight standpoint, like he holds his own with those two from the smaller schools. The issue is they are both like 6'2", 6'3". He's 6'1". And like, I know a lot of people are trying to make the jump, and I keep bringing it back to Jalen Walker, Micah Parsons, but like there's a difference between 6'3" and 6'1".
It's about you're able to put more weight on a frame that's larger. So the weight concern isn't as big for someone who's, let's say James Pierce is 6'5". He's only like 255, or I think he's closer to 260.
Less than 250.
You can turn that into a 265 guy because he's taller and has that size on him. That's why if you look at like strongman, the sport, all the winners are like 6'8" because they can pack more muscle onto their body. You can't do that with a 6'1" person. It's like me and you is a good example. I'm 5'9". You're what, 6 foot 6'1". It's easier. 5'11" was that what you're gonna say?
Yeah, I was about to say. I was like, this is what I was trying to make about the 6'1" point. It's like I'm 5'11", and if you put me next to a 6'1" dude, you can tell there's a difference. And that's really
you guys
all it
can
is,
have.
That sometimes these inches make a difference.
You guys can have the same BMI, same muscle mass, and everything, but the taller person's gonna have more muscle and therefore be able to use more, be stronger with it, generate more like torque and explosion off the ground because they have more mass to add to the your physics equations there. And I think that's the hesitation with Josiah Stewart. I think that's also part of my hesitation with Jalen Walker being a premier number one edge rusher. I think he could be a fine like second option or like high end blitzer. I just if you're taking him in the top 10, I don't think you need him to be a number one. And that I think I explained that quite well on Tuesday, so we don't have to relive or relitigate the Jalen Walker stuff. But Josiah Stewart's in a similar ballpark when you're talking about those concerns.
Yeah, no, and they're valid. Like at the end of the day, being undersized is not the greatest gift coming out of college. However, when you see the motor, when you see the intelligence from some of these players, that's the trait where it's like, okay, you don't have this going for you, but you have a lot of these other traits going for you. And you can still play at these sizes and be a productive player. It's just when offenses are game planning against you, that does become potential liability when you are game planning. So we've talked about three different flavors at this point. I'm not the biggest fan of vanilla in terms of your prototype defensive end that checks off all the athleticism boxes. For me, I'm more of like a chocolate and strawberry guy. I'm okay with that smaller size pass rusher that has a lot of tools in their bag, or the tools that they do have in their bag, they're really, really good at. Or in the case of Strawberry, which isn't everybody's cup of tea because of the issues in the run game, but these faster, potentially lighter or smaller edge rushers that are a little bit quicker off the line, they can sometimes really damage you in the pass game. But they can also be a double-edged sword and coming back when it comes to defending the run. So where do we want to go after this? Who are some of your prospects as we've rounded out this Neapolitan ice cream carton that we want to touch on that are just either in these boxes or in their own flavor, like a Moose Tracks or a salted
cookies
caramel.
And cream or something? Yeah.
Exactly.
I do want to bring up the chocolate metaphors one more time because I think the way that I laid it out actually makes a ton of sense. Do you know what the most common ice cream flavor in the country is? It's vanilla. And that's going to be the most common flavor in the NFL because teams still have their size and athleticism thresholds that they need to meet. So while I think chocolate might be more bold or more appealing, or strawberry might be more different, you're always going to need to come back to vanilla and have somebody like that on your team. And that's why you're going to see Micah Williams go in the top 15. That's why you're going to see Shamar Stewart pushed up despite having less than 2 sacks this season. I can count his total career sack production on my hand if I like chop my pinky in half and get 4.5 there. But if you want to look at other flavors of ice cream, this might sound kind of crazy, but when I was in Spain, I studied abroad in Spain for a summer. My favorite flavor of ice cream was lemon, like lemon gelato. That was one of my favorites
Oh, it was a
there. And
gelato, not a sorbet. That's
it was
very nice.
they had these tiny little like gelato ice cream stores. They're like the size of my bedroom here. But that was my favorite. And I think out of the rest of the guys that we haven't talked about yet, my favorite is going to be Braden Swinson from LSU. We talk about designated pass rushers a lot, and I don't want to put down Braden Swinson's pass rushing ability. He had 8.5 sacks this year, but I think Braden Swinson starting, even if you aren't convinced on his pass rushing, he can be a designated run defender, which is something really rare for an outside linebacker prospect. Really disciplined run defender, sets a very firm edge, no wasted movement with his hands like Michael Williams in the run game. I think he can also drop and cover in the short area, kind of like what we talked about if you're rushing or blitzing. And I think he has good bend for his size. My thing is he needs to learn to finish more plays like Shamar Stewart. Despite having 8.5 sacks, he probably could add close to 15 if he were a better finisher. And I think he's just a little bit slower at the position as well. But the lemon flavor of being an excellent run defender, despite all that, and a decent pass rusher is something that I think a lot of people are going to like. Panthers included, because I believe, yes, we do have a 30 visit, or we've already hosted a 30 visit with Swinson.
Yeah, he meets the 6'4" criteria. He is, I think, just a little over 250. Can obviously put on more weight. A lot to like about his game. Very productive college season, college career. And I think that's something that can translate. And if that is a direction they want to go based on how the cards fall, because again, you don't know if a guy like Mason Graham falls to 8, if like, okay, we still do need guys at edge, but we really like this prospect and don't feel like we can get an interior defensive lineman of this caliber, then that's a guy on day 2, and he's not going to make it the day 3.
It would be round 2, I would imagine. Yeah.
It would probably be 57 for a guy of his talent. But there are guys each round, and they're interviewing. A lot of these guys have 30 visits with a lot of these guys where it's like, okay, if we don't get an edge in this round, maybe we can get an edge this round. And I guarantee you they're going to double, if not triple dip at this position. It's at which round and which pick based on how other positions fall, because it's not just edge the team needs. And so I think that's what changes kind of the board.
Yeah, if we want to talk about another flavor, maybe like pistachio, something you don't see too often, but you enjoy it when you see it. Q Robinson with Alabama, he'll be round 3 or 4, and I bring up the you don't see it too often because his true pass rush reps were quite low, under 200 out of all the snaps that he had, which is really, really low. But I think you can explain that away with having, Will Anderson and Dallas Turner in front of you a ton, and having guys this year when Alabama changes their scheme, like LT Overton, who's more of the Micah Williams who can play defensive end. Those were the kind of guys they were starting. So you didn't see a ton of outside linebacker play. But on the stuff you did see, you could see a disciplined run defender. You could see someone who got into the backfield, didn't finish plays a ton, but when you rarely saw him, just like kind of how you rarely try pistachio, I really enjoy pistachio. It's not like one of my favorites, but it's good when you see it. And I think that's the kind of guy you can get end of round 3, maybe at the top of day 3 or round 4. And yet again, another guy that the Panthers have brought in. So you're talking about all these different flavors that they're bringing in. If they miss out on a guy, they have a ton of contingency plans.
For me, I like a guy like Q Robinson because he reminds me of like a Josh Uche. You have like a true, like a pass down. You're getting him out on there because he's going to get around the edge and he's going to force the issue. And I like that about Q Robinson. This guy's like 6'4", I think 250 pounds. Again, similar like body type as like Braden Swinson. I think he's a little bit faster around the edge. Guy that I like that the Panthers also had a visit with. A lot of these guys that were firing off have had team visits, but Jordan Birch out of Oregon, I think he was a big reason why they made a big playoff run, wreaked a lot of havoc. This is a bigger dude. I mean, we're talking, I think he's like 6'5", 270, 280 pounds. I think he's actually, out of all the guys that we've talked about today, the only guy who's, I think, around 280 pounds. Jamar Stewart obviously played at 290, but I don't know if he's going to get back to that kind of weight. But to have that kind of weight at the edge, I was really impressed with his bull rush and just his ability in the run game. I feel like if that's a guy where you want to, if you don't want to go a Micah Williams, Jamar Stewart early on, he's that guy that's going to fit that prototype build. And I think have room to grow and develop. And you don't feel like there's a lot of pressure from being a first round pick to produce right away. I think there is time to develop and grow with a guy like Jordan Birch. And I like him. We said before, or I said before coming on air to you that I really would like, based on consensus, like a Jordan Birch in the 3rd round and then go Q Robinson in the 4th round. And I feel like you have a pass rusher and a run stuffer. And it's very reminiscent for me as a Carolina Panthers fan. And obviously I would want a little bit more production from these two players compared to the two I'm about to mention, but like Mario Addison and Wes Horton. That was the 1-2 punch I felt like we got with those two back in the Panthers, back in the 2010s. And a lot of that happened from, you have your 2 dudes up front, which it looks like we're fixing the interior. And then you have these guys that you can rotate on the outside. So I think that'll really help the room. Again, that's not my perfect take, just something that I would personally like based on seeing how these visits are going and wanting multiple dart throws at this position.
For sure. I like Jordan Birch a lot as well. Inside out versatility, right? So he can be the defensive end in an odd front and then kick out on the outside when you need him to. Or if you play even front, you can move him in on pass rush downs. He has the good size. I think he's can be a good run defender, like you're talking about. Maybe a cookies and cream kind of thing, right? Some vanilla like Jamar Stewart and Micah Williams, but throwing in some aspects of other rushers as well. I think he'll be similar to Q Robinson, day 3, day 4, or day 3, round 3 and round 4. There's not a day 4 in the draft. I guess you could consider the
free agents.
That and the supplemental draft, I guess you could consider as day 4 of the draft. But yeah, and yet again, another person the Panthers have brought in and started his college career at the University of South Carolina is a Columbia native too. So familiar with the area. That's also been a theme with a lot of the players that the Panthers have brought in is familiarity with the area. So maybe they're hinting at a guy there. They've also brought in Ashton Galote from Louisville and Femi Oladipo from UCLA. I'm a little more iffy on those guys, but again, they're doing their due diligence and bringing in multiple flavors, multiple rounds of projections for these edge rushers, and they're going to get somebody. That's just what it is.
I just don't think Galote passes the name test. It looks cool, but I don't think it rolls off the tongue the right way. Well, I didn't like his tape necessarily at Louisville, so maybe that's just me finding reasons to hate.
Well, and I want to say Gillette every time I see it.
It's not, but it isn't. It's like
so maybe he'll be a New England Patriot, and they'll do a promotion there. But
Gillette razors instead of Gillette razors. It's gonna be crazy.
Then like they might like change the E to an O or something. Who knows? But I think we can approach Purrfect Takes territory now.
We didn't talk about a couple of free agents or no?
Well, not really, because we didn't see a ton of high-profile movement. You mentioned we signed Patrick Jones. He fits that size threshold that the Panthers like what they require. I guess more so the extensions or the talk of extensions, I think, is the big offseason thing with edge rushers. The Danielle Hunter extension that he got, making him the 2nd highest paid edge rusher, I think is noteworthy because that's going to cause problems with the Trey Hendrickson extension. The fact that we haven't seen it yet still signals to me that they are not going to extend Trey Hendrickson. The one of the team officials, I don't know her official title, but said Hendrickson should be happy with his offer. That's never something that you want to hear for a team that's trying to retain talent. Like, you should be happy with what we're giving you, or, just trade me. And then there were reports, I think last night or the night before, that if Hendrickson's going to get traded, it's going to be after the draft, which is just horrible management from Cincinnati. I don't know why you would ever do that, because as soon as day 1 happens, his value shoots down. It's like driving a car off the lot. As soon as that draft happens, his value is going to get cut in half. So not really sure what the plan is there. Khalil Mack was brought back to the Chargers. Chase Young was brought back to the Saints. I think both of those are cap-saving moves. And the only kind of big payday free agent was Dayo Adengbo to the Chicago Bears. But that wouldn't stop me from taking an edge rusher on day 1 if I were the Bears, or if I were in their team-building mode.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to stop you from taking an edge in terms of like the biggest signing. Anybody that's looking at the free agency graph or guys that kind of moved places,
I
there's not a
forgot
lot
about
of guys
Josh
in the
Sweat.
top
I
right
forgot
corner.
about Josh Sweat. He's
Yep,
obviously the big one.
it's the Cardinals.
Um,
Yeah, he's the big guy.
but other than that, there was not a ton of movement.
No, you don't like Miles Garrett got his big extension to make him the highest paid non-quarterback in essence before Jamar Chase got his deal. And so like when you look at that, that's really just that the market kind of shifts as the cap increases and you have a lot of veteran movement. Like Dante Fowler goes to the Cowboys, Harold Landry goes to the Patriots, Khalil Mack stays with the Chargers, Matt Judon still free agent. That's a guy where you want a veteran presence that's going to get signed on the second wave. A guy like Emmanuel Ugba kind of fits that. Preston Smith, Zadarius Smith, Von Miller's out there now. So there's just a couple guys where when you're filling out that room, if you're missing one of these flavors, you don't have a vanilla, you don't have a chocolate, you don't have a strawberry. I think some of these guys provide that. I think, and I didn't talk about this necessarily with Micah Williams, but Emmanuel Ogba, another guy that's of a bigger frame, similar stature in terms of just physicality. That's a guy that if you need a player, a vanilla defensive end in your room, he might be the guy. So it'll be interesting to just monitor players like that on the move. And so again, like you said, nothing big or significant. If there's going to be any big news, it's going to involve Trey Hendrickson, similar to Brian Burns. The only reason I would see them trading him after the draft is typically there's a future discount value on picks in a draft like one or two ahead. And so because of that discount rate, I think if he was going for a fourth round pick in this year's draft, it could be a third round pick in next year's draft. And we've seen veterans get moved that are still like a year on the deal or whatnot. Von Miller, for instance, got moved for a second round pick. And that's just, you have these contenders that are like, hey, we can eat some of the salary cap and the Bengals get a higher pick. I think that is the reason why they would be kind of holding off, is they're waiting for teams to kind of shake up everything with their roster after the draft and go, okay, what are the remaining team needs that we need to address?
For sure. I guess my hesitation is, you know what you're getting with the current draft, right? If they trade him to, let's say, the Panthers, right? We're pick 8, so like the 8th pick in the 3rd round. But then, what if he's the missing piece, right? And we go on and win the Super Bowl. The next year, we're giving you like the 95th pick or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, you know what you're getting this year, I guess is what I was getting at. But of course, the future discount is always something to think about. I think now we can get into Purrfect Takes now that we've addressed the kind of meager free agent movement with this position. Next week, we'll be able to talk about Milton Williams a bit and Osa Odigizua with the Cowboys. But this free agency group, not the best. With my take, we talked about a ton of different flavors today of edge rushers. And with the way the Panthers have been moving, with the 30 visits for, I think, at least 2 people that are going to go in round 1, and Ezra Raku and Shamar Stewart. They had the local visit with Jalen Walker because he's from Salisbury, so that counts as a local. My take is that the Panthers' first round pick this year will be an edge rusher. They're gonna go to the gelato store, the place in Spain. It was called Regma, the ice cream store. They're gonna go there. They're gonna take an edge rusher, a premium one in round 1. And that's just what it's going to be. And some fans might be disappointed. I know a lot of fans are big Jalen Walker supporters, or they might be big Micah Williams or Shamar Stewart haters. But I really think, and this is me talking out of my opinion, I try not to like give my opinion as the be-all thing, but I really think you should be happy if Micah Williams is the pick. And I know his production might not be Abdul Carter's or something like that, but I think he can truly project to be edge 1 in our defense.
I'm gonna hold off on edge 1 talks. I think he's good in the run. I think there is room for growth as a pass rusher, but until that growth materializes, I'm not gonna bank on anything there based on what we see in the edge room, because you're talking about the Panthers are gonna go edge first round. I think if they stay at pick 8, and I said this on the wide receiver podcast when we did that breakdown on that position group, that we are not taking a wide receiver at 8. I agree with you that if we stay at the 8 pick, that Micah Williams is the selection. And the reason why is because he checks off all the athleticism boxes. And I think he's worth that top 10 pick. There's not as much of a gamble or projection as you have with a guy like Jalen Walker. And I think the reason why they're doing their due diligence on Jalen Walker and they love him so much is if they were to move back, that's, I think, the time that Jalen Walker gets selected. I think he goes in the teens, similarly with Jahad Campbell, another linebacker that we talked about on Tuesday. So that's the direction I see the Panthers taking if they stay at pick 8, that if they're going to take Micah Williams, unless, for instance, and we've talked about this, Mason Graham falls, but doubt he's there. So I really think that is the selection that really addresses a major hole. And again, excellent run defender, will help against the worst run defense that we had last year. That will be a big boost, especially with Jadeveon Clowney. Love that pairing.
For sure. And if he can just mirror his sprained ankle performance and get 5 sacks, I think that would be second on what our team was last year. So a lot of room for improvement in the run game for sure. And in the pass game, you got to remember, not only did we give up the 3rd most rushing yards ever, but the 2nd most total yards ever in the season. So a lot of room for improvement on defense.
It's just not the sexy pick. It's just not the sexy pick. I'm mad. I'm making this take because I know it's what the front office is going to do, is that it's all about projections and not production. And it scares me because I would honestly take Donovan Ezerako over him if we're talking about if we want a disruptive presence on the edge. So that's just me. But Panthers are going to take Micah Williams because they love the prototypical size and strength at that position.
When we get closer to the draft, we'll have a mock draft episode with all 32, and then we'll have a Panthers mock episode. I don't know which will be Tuesday, which will be Thursday. We can really debate at that point which edge rusher we should take in the first round. I'm still going Micah Williams. He's much higher on my board. Ezeraku is still top 32 for me, but I think Micah Williams is a more sound pick. That's neither here nor there. Next week on Tuesday, we're getting to the final position group, my favorite group to watch film of for the draft. That's the interior defensive line, defensive tackles, whatever you want to call it. Tuesday, we'll do that. Thursday, probably no episode. I'll be on vacation. If Steve wants to solo an episode, all glory or all power to you. But that's going to be your discretion on Thursday. But after that, like we're saying, mock drafts, and then it's time for the actual draft, and we're excited for that. But until then, until next week, you can find us on Twitter, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Pods, wherever you get your content. On Twitter, we're doing our top 15 prospect countdown. We started today with Armand Membu. He's number 15 on my board. Tomorrow, as a little sneak peek, will be Micah Williams. So if you want to see some Micah Williams clips, be sure to check out our Twitter. But until then, keep pounding.